Let's dive into implement management and security solutions. Azure Migrate provides a centralized hub to assess and migrate to Azure on-premises servers, infrastructure, applications, and data. Azure Migrate uses a lightweight Azure Migrate appliance to perform agentless discovery of on-premises VMware VMs, Hyper-V VMs, other virtualized machines, and physical servers. Continuous discovery collects machine configuration information and performance metadata, as well as application data. Here's what the appliance collects from on-premises machines: machine disk and NIC metadata, installed applications, roles, and features, performance data, including CPU and memory utilization, disk IOPS, and throughput. After collecting data, you can export the application inventory list to find apps and SQL Server instances running on your machines. You can use the Azure Migrate database assessment tool to understand SQL Server readiness. You can then export the assessment report and filter on these categories to understand the Azure readiness. Ready for Azure. Machines can be migrated as is to Azure without any changes. Conditionally ready for Azure. Machines can be migrated to Azure but need minor changes in accordance with the remediation guidance provided in the assessment. Not ready for Azure. Machines can't be migrated to Azure as is. Issues must be fixed in accordance with the remediation guidelines before migration. Readiness unknown. Azure Migrate can't determine machine readiness because of insufficient metadata. Migration. For VMware, there are agent and agentless based migrations. In either case, they require a lightweight VM appliance. For migrating Hyper-V VMs, Azure Migrate Server Migration installs software providers, Microsoft Azure Site Recovery Provider, and Microsoft Azure Recovery Service Agent on Hyper-V hosts or cluster nodes. Note that the Azure Migrate appliance isn't used for Hyper-V migration. For migration of physical servers, AWS or GDP, you also need to prepare a machine for the replication appliance. Prepare on-premises machines for migration to Azure. It is recommended to verify migration limitation. There are discovery, assessment, and migration limits for Azure Migrate. While it is recommended to assess machines before migrating, you don't have to. Other steps in preparing the migration include selecting a migration method of the agentless or agent-based migration methods to determine which one works best. The compare link on the slide is another good one for you to review. Recommend. Once you have performed discovery, done an assessment, and reviewed the preparations, then those will give you the information needed to recommend a migration approach. Web Application Firewall provides a centralized protection of your web applications from common exploits and vulnerabilities. Web applications are increasingly targeted by malicious attacks that exploit commonly known vulnerabilities. SQL injection and cross-site scripting are among the most common attacks. WAF can be deployed with Azure Appliance Gateway, Azure Front Door, and Azure Delivery Network or CDN service from Microsoft. WAF on Azure CDN is currently under private preview, so therefore it may not be on the exam at this point. WAF has features that are customized for each specific service. Each of the first three links will take you to tutorials on how to implement these capabilities, so make sure that you browse through them to understand how to implement a WAF in each of the scenarios. Additionally, there are several built-in Azure policy definitions to manage WAF resources, such as WAF should be enabled for Azure Front Door Service, for Application Gateway, for the specified mode for Azure Front Door Service, or should use the specified mode for Application Gateway. Azure Firewall is a managed cloud-based network security service that protects your Azure virtual network resources. It's a fully stateful firewall as a service with built-in high availability and unrestricted cloud scalability. You can centrally create, enforce, and log application and network connectivity policies across subscriptions and virtual networks. Azure Firewall uses a static public IP address for your virtual network resources, allowing outside firewalls to identify traffic originated from your virtual network. The service is fully integrated with Azure Monitor for logging and analytics. With Azure Firewall, you can configure application rules that define fully qualified domain names that can be accessed from a subnet, network rules that define source address, protocol, destination port, and destination address. For production deployments, a hub and spoke model is recommended where the firewall is in its own VNet. The workload servers are in paired VNets in the same region with one or more subnets. This VNet will contain 3 subnets. Note in this deployment, the firewall will be in the hub subnet, and the subnet name must be named Azure Firewall Subnet, all one word. In the tutorial, you will create a virtual machine for the workload, then deploy the firewall in the VNet that was created. The workload subnet with the VM will need a default route to enable traffic out to the firewall. This will be the quad 0 or 0.0.0.0 route, with the next hop being set to virtual appliance. Finally, the application and network rules will be specifically set to whatever needs to be accessed. For exam preps, I like to review the FAQ docs to make sure that you check them out whenever you see them. Azure Front Door is a global scalable entry point that uses Microsoft's Global Edge network to create fast, secure, and widely scalable web applications. Front Door works at layer 7 HTTP and HTTPS layer using an Anycast protocol with a split TCP/IP and Microsoft's global network to improve global connectivity. Based on your routing method, you can ensure that Front Door will route your client requests to the fastest and most available application backend. An application backend is any internet-facing service hosted inside or outside of Azure. Front Door supports both Azure and non-Azure resources in the backend pool. The application can be either on-premises or located in another cloud provider. Front Door's Web Application Firewall, or WAF, can be used to mitigate a number of different types of attacks. Using the managed rule set provides protection against common attacks. Traffic from outside a defined geographic region or within a defined region can be blocked or redirected to a static web page. IP addresses and ranges that you identify as malicious can be blocked. Rate limiting can be applied to prevent IP addresses from calling your services too frequently. In some cases, you may want to restrict your access to your web applications by countries or regions. The Web Application Firewall service in Front Door enables you to define a policy using custom access rules for a specific path on your endpoints to either allow or block access from specified countries and regions. A WAF policy contains a set of custom rules. The rule consists of match conditions, an action, and a priority. In a match condition, you define a match variable, operator, and match value. To determine the health and proximity of each backend for a given Front Door environment, each Front Door environment periodically sends a synthetic HTTP/HTTPS request to each of your configured backends. Front Door then uses these responses from the prod to determine the best backend resources to route your client requests. Front Door supports sending probes over either HTTP or HTTPS protocols. These probes are sent over the same TCP/IP ports configured for routing client requests and cannot be overridden. Azure Bastion is a service you deploy that lets you connect to a virtual machine using your browser and the Azure portal. The Azure Bastion service is a fully platform-managed PaaS service that you provision inside your virtual network. It provides secure and seamless RDP SSH connectivity to your virtual machines directly from the Azure portal over TLS. When you connect via Azure Bastion, your virtual machines do not need a public IP address, agent, or special client software. Note the prerequisites. Any virtual network, a Windows virtual machine in the virtual network, and the following required rules: read a role in the virtual machine, read a role on the NIC with private IP of the virtual machine, read a role on the Azure Bastion resource. Ports. To connect to the Windows VM, you must have the following ports open on your Windows VM, mainly RDP or 3389. When working with Azure Bastion, you can use also network security groups. As users connect to workloads using Azure Bastion, Bastion can log diagnostics of the remote sessions. You can then use the diagnostics to view which users connected to which workloads, at what time, from where, and other such relevant login information. In order to use the diagnostics, you must enable diagnostics logs on Azure Bastion. Once the Bastion service is provisioned and deployed in your virtual network, you can use it to seamlessly connect to any VM in this virtual network. As users connect to workloads, Azure Bastion can be used to monitor the remote sessions and take quick management actions. Azure Bastion session monitoring lets you view which users are connected to which VMs. It shows the IP that users are connected from and how long they've been connected and when they are connected. The session management experience lets you select an ongoing session and force disconnect or delete a session in order to disconnect the user from the ongoing session. Azure Active Directory Access Reviews helps your organization keep the network more secure by managing its resource access lifecycle. With access reviews, you can schedule regular reviews or perform ad hoc reviews to see who has access to specific resources, such as applications and groups. Track reviews for insights, compliance, or policy reasons. Delegate reviews for specific admins, business owners, or end users who can self-attest to the need for continued access. Use the insights to efficiently determine if users should continue to have access. Automate review outcomes, such as removing users' access to resources. Access reviews is an Azure AD identity governance capability. The other capabilities are entitlement management, privileged identity management, and terms of use, also known as TOU. Together, they help organizations address these 4 questions. Which users should have access to which resources? Number 2, what are those users doing with that access? Number 3, is there effective organizational control for managing access? And finally, can auditors verify that the controls are working? Planning your access reviews deployment is essential to make sure you achieve your desired governance strategy for users in your organization. You can set up access reviews for groups, Azure AD roles in Azure PIM, and Azure resource roles, think like RBAC in Azure PIM.